The room shook with silence, heavier than thunder, as Emily said, "How could you betray me?" Her voice cracked, yet her eyes blazed with disbelief. The betrayal carved through her heart like a jagged blade. Every memory she trusted now felt poisoned. She staggered back, clutching her chest as if the wound was visible. The clock on the wall ticked louder than her breath. James stood frozen, his face pale, his lips parting with no words. His silence screamed louder than any confession. The air burned with tension, sharp enough to cut through skin. Emily's legs trembled, but she refused to fall. "You took everything I gave," she whispered, her voice breaking, "and turned it into a weapon against me." The fluorescent lights flickered, shadows crawling across the walls like predators. James lowered his gaze, shame etched into every line of his face. Yet, his guilt brought no comfort. Her spirit cracked, but within the fracture, a fire sparked. The room was no longer just four walls. It became a battlefield of shattered trust, where Emily's soul fought to survive the storm that had been unleashed in a single moment of betrayal. Emily stood frozen as silence consumed the room, her voice echoing in her chest. Her mind replayed every memory, every smile, every word James had spoken, now shattered glass cutting deep. She wanted to scream, yet no sound escaped. The betrayal grew louder with every heartbeat, pressing her into a corner of disbelief. She whispered, "Why did you do this?" The words trembled but carried the weight of 1,000 wounds. James flinched, his silence twisting into cruelty. The rain outside pounded harder, sensing with her pulse. Her legs wavered, but she stood firm. In that storm, she realized the pain was not just from him. It was from years of being overlooked, doubted, and unseen. This betrayal had unlocked every scar she carried. Emily's eyes narrowed, the fire inside her sparked, dim yet undeniable. Though broken, she began to see that survival was not silence. It was defiance waiting to be born. The clock ticked like a hammer striking her soul. Emily said, "You destroyed the only truth I trusted." Her breath hitched as she steadied herself. James stepped forward but stopped, as if chained by guilt. His silence was worse than denial, each pause cutting deeper. The weight of unspoken words crushed the air between them. Shadows on the wall swayed like silent witnesses, casting judgment on both. Emily's fists clenched, the tremor in her fingers betraying her strength. Her chest rose and fell in sharp breaths, every inhale a struggle. She felt anger rising, mingling with despair. Yet beneath the fury, a whisper of strength formed. The betrayal could break her heart, but it could not erase her will. Rain lashed against the glass, as if the storm itself raged with her. Emily's reflection stared back from the window, eyes hollow yet burning. She whispered, "I gave you my trust, my soul." Her breath fogged the glass, vanishing as quickly as it came. James turned away, his body sagging with the weight of his choice. Silence fell like a blade, severing what little hope remained. Emily pressed her palm against the cold glass, her fingers trembling. The room felt smaller, suffocating. In the reflection, she saw not only herself but the shadows of her scars, childhood doubts, silent wounds, and now betrayal layered atop them. Yet within that reflection, she saw defiance blooming. The storm no longer mirrored her pain, but her rising strength. Emily's voice steadied, though her body trembled. "I will not let this destroy me," she said, the words raw but resolute. James turned slowly, his eyes glistening, but no apology escaped. His silence chained him, while her words began to cut the bonds of her pain. For the first time, the balance shifted. Her heart ached, yet her spirit refused to bow. Each breath grew heavier, but also stronger. The betrayal had wounded her, yes, but it had also ignited something unyielding. Emily stood taller, no longer just the victim but a survivor clawing toward her own redemption. The rain outside slowed, the storm easing, as if bowing to her awakening strength. Morning sunlight crept through thin curtains, but Emily felt none of its warmth. Her body lay heavy on the edge of the bed, yet her mind replayed every detail of last night. Betrayal echoed louder than the ticking alarm clock. She whispered, "How do I face them now?" The question lingered in the stale air of her apartment. Coffee brewed weakly in the corner, its bitter scent matching her mood. She pulled her knees to her chest, tears threatening to rise. Emily saw not just James' face, but every memory of rejection in her life, woven into his silence. Her chest tightened, but a small voice within whispered, "Stand up." The floor felt cold against her bare feet as she rose. Each step carried the weight of her fears, but also a flicker of defiance. Though broken, she refused to let the morning bury her. Emily walked through the crowded office corridor, the hum of chatter surrounding her like static. Her chest tightened as eyes seemed to follow her. Paranoia or truth, it no longer mattered. She whispered under her breath, "They know." The sting of humiliation clung to her skin. She kept her head down, gripping her bag tightly, moving as though chased by shadows. The betrayal lived on her like a mark, invisible yet blinding. Each voice she heard felt like a whisper against her back. Her steps grew heavier, yet something inside urged her forward. She had survived storms before. The office walls closed in like a cage, but Emily's jaw clenched. "I won't disappear," she thought. Her silence had protected her once, but now it suffocated. With trembling resolve, she took her seat, staring at the blank computer screen that mirrored her fears. At her desk, Emily stared at the glowing monitor, its blank page a reflection of her turmoil. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, but froze. Whispers from nearby desks reached her ears, each one piercing. She muttered, "I can't let them see me break." Yet her throat ached with unspoken pain. The screen glowed brighter, taunting her silence. The betrayal wasn't just James. It was the culmination of years of doubt she had swallowed whole. Her fists clenched against the desk. Across the aisle, Daniel glanced her way. His sharp eyes caught her trembling hand. Emily looked down, ashamed, yet a spark of defiance rose. For the first time, she didn't want to disappear. The fire within her whispered, "Write your truth, not their judgment." She lifted her chin, fragile, yet unbroken. Daniel approached slowly, his expression unreadable. He leaned against her desk and said, "You look like you've seen hell." His voice was blunt, yet strangely grounding. Emily forced a weak smile, muttering, "Maybe I have." Silence lingered, heavy but different. Unlike James, Daniel's presence carried no lies. His eyes studied her like an open book. He shrugged, smirking faintly. "You're tougher than you think," he said. Emily's chest tightened, the words both comforting and jarring. She looked at him, searching for mockery, but found only truth. For the first time, someone wasn't pitying her. They were challenging her. The storm inside her shifted, no longer just chaos, but something forming strength. She whispered, "I don't feel strong." Daniel replied, "You don't need to feel it to be it." His words struck deep, the first anchor in her drowning sea. The day dragged, yet Emily carried Daniel's words with her like a fragile flame. Each task felt heavy, but the spark of defiance refused to die. She caught herself whispering, "I am tougher than this." The phrase steadied her breath. Every passing glance from her coworkers still pierced, but it no longer defined her. She remembered the girl who once hid in shadows, who never spoke for fear of judgment. That girl was fading. Emily now stood taller, her silence breaking into whispers of strength. As the office lights dimmed, she gathered her things. The night outside was no longer suffocating, it felt open, waiting. The betrayal had shattered her, but in its cracks she saw a chance to rebuild. Not with James, not with approval, but with her own fire. Morning returned like a judge, and the office hummed with careful voices that cut. Emily said, "I am not hiding today." Her pulse thudded as she opened the project deck. The cursor blinked like a dare. Footsteps slowed near her desk, carrying rumor like smoke. She felt the sting but lifted her chin. Daniel stopped beside her and said, "Stand tall and keep it simple." His tone was blunt, but it steadied her spine. She remembered nights spent building this plan while doubt gnawed. James appeared at a distance, unreadable and hushed. The room seemed to tilt toward him. Emily said, "Truth holds, even if hands let go." She clicked share, and the screen flooded with charts and lines. A hush formed, not hostile, just waiting. Beneath it, a small flame in her chest refused to bow. A meeting request from HR flashed like a flare, and her stomach knotted. Emily said, "Let it be clean and brief." The corridors stretched long, lined with glass and controlled smiles. Daniel walked beside her without ceremony. He said, "You answer only what is asked." The advice was a rail she gripped. Inside the room, forms and polite phrases waited like nets. She spoke clearly and held to fact. No apology, no extra air. The questions grazed at rumor, then retreated. Emily said, "My work stands on its own, and let silence do the rest." When it ended, she breathed as if surfacing. Daniel nodded once, not kind, just exact. The world did not soften, yet her footing felt less fragile. Back at her desk, an anonymous thread arrived like a match. Screenshots of messages stacked cold and tidy. Emily said, "Show me everything." She scrolled and found the pattern, not loud, but precise. Praise in daylight, knives at dusk. There was James, careful in tone, letting others swing while he arranged the room. Her chest burned, then cooled into focus. Daniel sent a single line that read, "Document and move." She saved, time-stamped, and filed the trail. Emily said, "I will not mirror their smallness." The words steadied her hands. The urge to explode passed like thunder at a distance. What remained was choice, clean and unshaken. She chose the work, and the record, and the next step. The team gathered, and the table gleamed like a stage. James opened with polish, and the room leaned toward him. Emily let him finish, then spoke with clear cadence. Emily said, "Here are the results, and here are the sources." She placed outcomes beside methods, firm and spare. Daniel added, "Assumptions were tested, and the errors are logged." No flourish, only steel. James tried to redirect with charm that felt thin. Emily said, "We can stay with facts or drift into fog." The line held the room. Charts met questions, and questions met receipts. Heat rose in her face but did not rule her. The meeting moved on rails. She laid down, quiet and strong. Evening spread across the city like a cool cloth, and the noise thinned. Emily walked a slow block to breathe. She said, "Today I held the line." The words did not heal, but they anchored. Windows glowed above like patient stars. She thought of the girl who once shrank from every stare. That girl was fading in the rearview. Daniel's blunt faith still rang like iron. She smiled without softness. Emily said, "I will build what I can stand on." The vow was not grand, only true. She felt tired, not broken. The night met her without threat. Tomorrow would test again, and she was willing. The storm of whispers thickened, and every corner of the office carried suspicion. Emily said, "They want me to drown in their noise." Her hands gripped the edge of her desk as voices circled like vultures. Daniel leaned closer and said, "Let them talk, you stay with the work." His tone was blunt, his eyes steady. The chatter grew sharper, threads of lies weaving in the air. Emily inhaled deeply, the sound louder than the crowd. She reminded herself that silence could be strength but not retreat. James passed by with polished calm, his gaze brushing her without pause. Emily whispered, "I will not bend to shadows." She turned back to her screen, her pulse fierce. The world pressed against her ribs, yet she sat straighter. The rising conflict no longer just crushed her, it sharpened her will. By midday, Emily faced the team's review. The air was thick with judgment. She whispered, "This is where they expect me to fall." James spoke first, his voice polished, his slides crisp. Murmurs of approval followed. Emily's chest tightened, but Daniel's glance steadied her. When her turn came, her voice wavered at first, then found iron. Emily said, "This is the data, tested and clear." Charts filled the screen, undeniable in weight. Questions came sharp, but she answered with focus. Her hands trembled under the table, unseen, but her face held steady. James smirked faintly, but his charm cracked. For once, the team leaned toward her, not him. Emily whispered inside, "I will not disappear." The meeting ended, but the battle did not. Whispers trailed Emily in the corridor, sharper than applause. She clenched her teeth, each step like dragging weight. Daniel caught up and said, "You held the floor. Don't forget it." She exhaled, the sound shaky. Emily said, "I still feel like the walls are closing in." He shrugged, smirking faintly. "Let them shrink. You keep walking." His words struck like iron, simple and grounding. Emily raised her head higher. The betrayal had made her fragile, but it also revealed steel. She walked past their stairs without bending. Each stride was defiance written on tile floors. That night, Emily sat by her window, city lights flickering like restless eyes. She said softly, "I am not the same woman who hid in corners." The reflection in the glass showed her face lined with exhaustion, yet alive with flame. She replayed James' silence, his smirk, and felt less crushed by it. Daniel's words still echoed, not gentle but sharp enough to anchor her. She pressed her palm to the glass, the cold surface grounding. The scars of her past still whispered, but they no longer chained her. Emily said, "I am more than what they left me with." For the first time, her voice did not shake. The night seemed to bend, carrying her vow across the skyline. The next morning brought colder air, yet Emily's steps carried new weight. She walked into the office not unseen, but unbowed. She whispered, "They will not erase me." The stares still lingered, but they no longer pierced as before. James kept his distance, his polished calm fraying at the edges. Daniel caught her eye, nodding once. His gesture was not comfort, it was recognition. Emily moved to her desk, placed her files down, and sat with quiet strength. Her heart still ached, her scars still fresh, but she was no longer trapped in silence. The storm of betrayal had not ended, but she had found her anchor. Emily said, "I am still here." The words were steady, not loud, yet powerful enough to fill the room. The morning broke with a quiet edge, yet Emily felt the storm waiting. She opened her email and froze. A file, marked urgent, sat at the top. Her breath hitched as she clicked. Inside were threads of messages, careless words, cruel setups, and James' name at the center. Not just whispers, but orchestrated betrayal. Her chest clenched, the truth burning sharp. Emily whispered, "It was you all along." The realization cut deeper than silence. Years of her doubt, her scars, her pain, now framed with his intent. She stood from her desk, her pulse thunder. The room blurred, but the truth was clear. James had not just let her fall, he had built the trap. And in that revelation, her sorrow hardened into fire. Emily's knees weakened, but she refused to collapse. She whispered, "I will not be his victim anymore." She gathered the file, copied every word, every timestamp. Daniel noticed her trembling hands and asked, "What did you find?" She turned to him, eyes burning, and said, "Proof." His brows lifted, no smile, just understanding. The weight of the truth pressed her shoulders down, yet beneath it, she found steel. She looked at James across the room, his calm face a mask she could now tear away. Her lips curved, not in joy, but in defiance. Emily said, "He wanted me silent. He gave me my voice instead." Later that day, Emily entered the small glass room where James waited, his posture relaxed, mask unbroken. She carried the file with steady hands, though her heart thundered. James smirked and said, "You look shaken." Emily placed the papers on the table, her eyes never leaving his. She said, "This is yours." His smirk faltered, the cracks forming in his calm. For years she had trembled before silence, but now his silence would tremble before her truth. Daniel's words echoed inside her, "You don't need to feel strong to be it." And she was. Emily said, "You betrayed me, but you will not break me." The room held still, no air left for his lies. The confrontation rippled through the office like thunder rolling. Whispers grew, but this time they did not sting, they watched. Emily walked past desks with her chin high, clutching the file. James trailed behind, his mask thinning with every step. Daniel caught her eye, nodding once, his approval silent but steady. Emily said within, "I am no longer unseen." The betrayal had once crushed her spirit, but the reveal lifted her higher. Her scars were not chains, they were proof of survival. She did not need to shout. Her stride was louder than words. That night, Emily sat alone on her balcony, city lights shimmering like scattered truths. She whispered, "He thought he ended me. He awakened me." The file rested on the table, a symbol of her wound and her weapon. The stars above blinked faintly through haze, fragile yet unyielding. She thought of her past, of silence chosen for safety, and felt it dissolve. The twist had broken her illusions, but it rebuilt her resolve. She said softly, "My voice is my redemption." And the words did not tremble. They carried into the night, a vow sealed by pain, sharpened into strength. The office buzzed with tension as word spread of a meeting that would decide everything. Emily stood at the edge of the conference room, her heart steady but heavy. She whispered, "This is the fight I cannot run from." James sat at the head of the table, his calm mask sharpened into arrogance. Daniel leaned against the wall, his expression steady, his eyes sharp on her. Emily clutched the file tighter, the evidence that could burn the lies away. She said, "The truth belongs here now." The room hushed, waiting for the clash. She walked forward, each step louder than the murmurs. Years of silence trailed behind her, but today her voice was her blade. Emily placed the file on the table, her hands steady, though her veins pulsed fire. She said, "These are your words, James. Not mine. Not theirs. Yours." The screen lit up with messages, cruel patterns clear. Gasps rippled across the table. James leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his calm cracking. He said, "This is twisted." Emily looked straight at him and replied, "No. This is truth." Her voice rang with a strength she had long buried. Daniel's eyes met hers, his nod almost imperceptible but anchoring. For the first time, James' silence worked against him. The room no longer leaned his way. James tried to regain control, his voice rising sharp. "This proves nothing but desperation." Emily's chest tightened, but her will sharpened. She replied, "It proves betrayal, planned and executed." Her words cut across the room. Colleagues shifted, whispers turning into doubt against him. The man who once ruled with charm now fought shadows. Daniel said dryly, "Desperation is hiding when the facts sit in front of you." The air turned heavier, silence filling the gaps between each breath. James' smirk faded, his mask collapsing piece by piece. Emily said firmly, "I am done being your silence." The confrontation escalated. James slammed his hand on the table, his voice echoing, but the evidence had already broken his shield. Emily did not flinch. She said, "You can shout, but truth doesn't bend." The colleagues who once followed his charm now avoided his gaze. Daniel stepped forward, his voice calm but final. "It's over, James," he said. The words landed heavy. James sank back into his chair, his chest heaving. For Emily, the moment felt like breath after drowning. She whispered inside, "This is not just survival, this is victory." The storm that crushed her had turned into her weapon. The meeting ended, not with applause, but with silence heavy and clear. James left the room, his shoulders sagging, the weight of truth finally crushing him. Emily remained standing, her heart racing, her hands trembling yet unbroken. Daniel approached, his tone steady. "You didn't just survive," he said, "you stood." Emily exhaled, the air sharp but freeing. She whispered, "I thought I was weak." Daniel shook his head, eyes firm. Weakness doesn't face storms like that. She felt the shift inside, a breaking of chains that had bound her since childhood. Emily had not only exposed betrayal, she had claimed her voice. And with it, her power. The office settled into uneasy quiet after the storm. Emily walked through the halls, no longer bowed by whispers. She whispered to herself, "I am still standing." Daniel crossed her path, his nod small but steady. For once, the stares of colleagues no longer pierced her. They simply acknowledged her presence. The silence that once suffocated now carried weight, her weight. Her scars were visible only to her, yet they had forged a fire none could ignore. At her desk, Emily opened a blank document. She stared at the cursor, but this time, it didn't taunt, it invited. She said softly, "This story is mine now." Her fingers began to type, not for survival, but for creation. Every keystroke felt like reclaiming space once stolen from her. The world had tried to bury her in silence, but now she carved her place in it. Later, Emily and Daniel stood outside under fading sunlight. He said, "You did what most never dare." His words were blunt, but edged with respect. Emily smiled faintly, her voice steady. "I didn't win alone." He shrugged, hands in pockets, and replied, "You chose to fight. That was yours." She felt the truth of it settle, not heavy but freeing. That night, Emily returned to her apartment balcony. The city stretched before her, alive with light and sound. She whispered, "I am not invisible anymore." The skyline seemed to pulse with her words. The betrayal had scarred her, but it had also given her a mirror. In that reflection, she saw not weakness, but survival turned into strength. In the quietest hour before dawn, Emily wrote a final line in her journal. She said softly, "Redemption is not theirs to give. It is mine to claim." She closed the book, her hand steady. The silence that followed was not heavy, but whole. For the first time, she did not feel small. She felt infinite. Her story, once shattered, now stood complete in her own voice.